Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Street Peace Coalition on Chicago Comcast Cable Channel 21. This is a live call-in show. Feel free to call in at the number that you see at the bottom of your screen. My name is Minister Michael Muhammad, co-founder of the Street Peace Coalition. We are a grassroots violence prevention and intervention group. This is our fourth season, I believe, coming to you over this channel, giving to you a different vantage point on the issue of violence in the black community. And this season, we've been trying to lay out the case of the social factors that are highly responsible for producing the quality of life that we experience in the black community and the associated violence. I'm going to go to our overhead. You can reach us at either one of these web addresses. The top one is our Facebook page, facebook.com Street Peace Coalition. Send us a friend request. We'd love to have you on our page, where every week or so we post critical information related to violence. And then at the bottom is our website, the streetpeacecoalition.weebly.com, where you can go on to our website and connect with our email. You can also reach out to us if you'd like to get involved and do some of this work, this volunteer work in the community. Because no one is more responsible for what happens to us than we are responsible for what happens to us. We just can't sit back and complain. We just can't sit back and tremble in fear. We can't just sit back and criticize others. We have to step up and make some sacrifices and make an effort to create better conditions where we live. And so you can see some of the work that we do on our website and understand the nature of what we do and where you might fit in to assist us in making our efforts even stronger. And so this season it's been primarily me talking to you, whereas previous seasons we've had a few guests. We've changed hosts a few times. And I brought on a few of our members, which was very rare because these are individuals that prefer to be off camera. And so it looks like we're having another technical difficulty going on here. I'm not sure if you're experiencing that at home, but we'll keep moving right along. And so last week I tried to pivot in our presentation about violence away from looking at the social institutions, the external social institutions that affect the black community, to dealing a little bit with the primary internal institution in the black community, and that is the black family. And so, of course, when I talked about the fact that society deals with us on a crime and punishment basis, based upon white supremacy, based upon demonizing us and making us monsters. So all of the primary institutions, from public education to the police department to the housing authority to the children and family services to IDOC, the prison system, as well as the county jail, all the way up to the federal government, invests a lot in dealing with us based upon the idea that the only way or the primary way to deal with us is crime and punishment. And so all of that is focused on the separation of black men from a proper socialization, proper education that is enriched with certain critical ingredients, as well as creating conditions that precipitate the inability of black men to serve as guardians, caregivers, and protectors of their families. This has been a long time practice in the United States of America of the separation of black men from their families. And so looking at that dynamic, we come to understand that our condition is not by accident. It is the result of socially engineered factors. And that, as I said before, it's not natural for even a man to abandon his offspring. And so whenever you find the possibility or statistics that seem in some cases to suggest that men of any group are abandoning their offspring, particularly Aboriginal people, that's not our way. It's just not in the nature of human beings to abandon their offspring. Whenever you find human beings readily abandoning their offspring, then you know that something has happened, some trauma has happened at some level, some defect of character has been imposed upon the character by a result of circumstances, etc., that has made those men do things that are against nature. Having said that, I think that black fathers get a bad rap because we do have higher rates of involvement in terms of the measurement of the hours of engagement, quality engagement of all fathers in the United States of America. Most of the recent studies suggest that black men in general spend more quality time with their children where they're involved in the lives of their children. And so most of the black men that I am blessed to know have a high interest in being involved in a good way in the lives of black children. It is no accident that in the lives of our children, the image of black men is missing, or in many cases, it is the image, the stereotypical image is projected onto our children. And so it affects self-esteem. So your self-esteem begins to form early on as a child, even before you enter school. So by the time you enter school, if you're not entering an environment that is nurturing your sense of self, your cultural identity, who you are in your skin, and what that should mean in terms of your value and your worth to society, now you start to develop self-esteem issues. And if your mind is bombarded with negative images of individuals that look like you, sound like you, talk like you, but they're cast in negative roles in society, then you're further damaging my self-esteem. If I don't have the opportunity to see heroes that look like me, intelligent people that look like me, thinkers and builders and organizers that look like me, authority figures that look like me, then it begins to affect my self-esteem in ways that even I don't realize. And so when we look at gang culture does not exist in a vacuum in the black community, any more than it exists in a vacuum in the Irish community, or the Italian community, or the Polish community, or the Japanese community, or the Eastern European communities that have gangs, youth gangs, and so-called criminal or street organizations in their culture. These things have been thoroughly studied and are very understood by social scientists, and all social scientists know that these things don't occur in a vacuum. These things are the byproduct of the quality of the society that you live in, or the lack thereof. And so we've got to understand that in order to deal with violence, in order to remediate violence, we've got to go to these root causes. We've got to have a serious no holds bar conversation about violence, because as I've said over and over and over again, I will continue to say wherever given the opportunity, that violence in the black community, while it is impacted by socioeconomics, that is not the root cause of violence in the black community. The root cause of violence in the black community is tied to the nature of American society. It's tied to the nature of how America was built. It's tied to the very nature and origins of the relationship of black people in what we call the United States of America, or the colonies. If we do not look at it in that historical context, then we are playing games. And whenever you hear your elected officials, many of them are smart enough and wise enough to know that you cannot police away violence. No matter how many police you hire, no matter how much technology you put into the police departments. They tried that under Bush and Clinton. They ramped up the militarization of police departments, and it did not remediate violence at all. It only made them more equipped to brutalize our communities and incarcerate our men in vast numbers. And so we need to understand that if we're going to remediate violence, the greatest opportunity for black people to remediate violence is in what we do in the black home, in our ability to make a decision, to make a commitment to the ideal of the traditional black family. This is where we have power. No matter who's governor, who's president, who's mayor, who's police chief, who's in charge of the schools, who's in charge of all of these external institutions, you and I have the God-given right to choose to mate, to choose to build family, to choose to fight through the challenges of building family, to learn how to stick together as man and woman, and set an example for children to love, nurture, and feed our children with a thorough knowledge and love of themselves, and equip them to cope with a society that has already decided to demonize, vilify, and monsterize them, but make them prepared to overcome this kind of social stereotype, to make great human beings who are able to transcend the pain, the psychic trauma that white America inflicts on our children. We have the ability of black fathers and black mothers to insulate them, to inoculate them from these things, if we could find it in our own consciousness to understand the need to build strong, viable black family. So some of you may say this is a mundane ideal, and in some ways it is, but we have been trained by society, living in a technologically advanced era, so to speak, that we look for some gadget, some electronic thing, some technology to solve our problems. It's got to be something complicated to solve our problems, when in fact most of our big problems have simple solutions. And so what I'm saying to you, that the statistics show that 63% of youth who commit suicide are from a fatherless home. 90% of homeless young people are youth who come from a fatherless home. 85% of young people diagnosed with some type of behavioral disorder come from a fatherless home. 80% of juvenile rapists come from a fatherless home. 71% of all juvenile dropouts come from fatherless homes. 75% of teen parents that wind up in drug treatment come from fatherless homes. I didn't say motherless homes, I said fatherless homes. And so in the black community, we have an issue. that we need to address. And this is how black women see black men and how black men see black men. And so until we come to terms with the fact that we as black men don't see ourselves correctly, nor do our women see us properly or correctly, we will never be able to produce generations of children that have within them the spiritual, psychological, and social development skills to overcome a culture of violence. And so earlier I went through the crack era and what happened to our families, starting in the mid 80s all the way through the 90s, and what happened to the black family during that era. And so we're living in the aftermath of that era. We're living in an era where black marriage is a joke at some levels in our community. We're living in an era where the ideal of honoring and respecting each other as mother and father and taking serious our duty, our responsibility, our moral obligations in the children that we produce is something that we're ill-equipped to do. And so until we understand that the responsibility is on us, regardless to what's the defects that we see in Chicago public schools, the corruption we see in Chicago Police Department, the corruption we see in Chicago Housing Authority, the incompetence, gross negligence, and the just loathing of black people that we experience in the Department of Children and Family Services, the brutal, monstrous treatment we receive in Cook County Jail and IDOC, and the heinous policies propelling themselves out of the federal government toward us as a community. It is in our homes that we can take our power back. It is in our homes that I can teach my son how to respect authority. It is in my home that I can teach my son and my daughters how to respect themselves, how to love themselves. It is in the home that I can teach them the proper relationship between authority in outside of the home, external authority as well as internal authority. It is in the home that I can teach them to set high goals and high values and live according to certain standards and principles for themselves that I have an obligation as a parent to try to exemplify. All of this can take place in the home. I can equip my son in the ability to navigate the rough streets of Chicago and the urban communities across America. I can do all of that in the home. In the home, I can teach my son how to be a man and how to pull up his pants and how to groom himself, how to present himself to the world in a way that even by the way he looks, it gives the world a positive first impression upon him. It is in the home that I can teach my sons how to respect the women that they're attracted to, the women they're interested in, the women they fall in love with or marry, and how to take care of the future children that they will produce. All of this can take place in the home. And the more we do this in the home, the more we will begin to eliminate a culture of violence in the black community. I have a caller. Caller, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, sir, my friend. This is Ray again.
Hi, Ray.
I was with you all the way till education. Do you know that it takes about 6 months to a year to even bring up a teacher if she's doing something wrong? So what I'm trying to say is, listen, bad teachers don't teach anything to the kids, and yet the union keeps them in there. Kids are afraid to go to school because they're going to get beat up. Teachers don't say nothing to the bullies because they're afraid that they're going to get reprimanded. So with education like that, how can any young kid, learn anything when he's afraid to go to school? And he's also afraid he might get shot. So, I sorry for the young kids today because they go to bad schools because you have some bad teachers that don't teach anything, but yet Believe me, they're asking for more money every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I understand your sentiment. But again, let's go to root cause and effect. It is not a teacher's job to discipline my child. It is my job to instill discipline in my child before I turn them over to an external institution such as a school. Teachers go to school to learn how to teach. They learn the pedagogy of instruction. And even if they're parents themselves, they do not get paid to parent my children. They get paid to support my values as a parent, to reflect similar values, but primarily they get paid to give academic instruction to our children. So if we have schools full of children who have no discipline, we really cannot blame the teachers. We have to look at the parents. There's no way around that. Okay? Caller, I have another call. I'm going to go to the next caller. Go ahead, caller, with your question or comment.
Yes, you know what? Sometimes it's so wonderful to listen sometimes instead of speak. You learn a lot of little things sometimes what you hear. But let me tell you, how do you think the reason why these kids are not going to school because of the teachers? Do you think that all these kids not going to school because they bullies? It's one thing, it starts at home. And like you say, there ain't no fathers in the home, and sometimes the mothers, they doing what they doing. They not being checked on, see, do they go to school? Kids do not want to go to school. That's why when they get to a certain age, they go look for a job at McDonald's. They fill application out. They want to make $150 million, and then they can't write their own names. The problem relies on the community. It relies on your household. It's not the teachers. It's not the teachers. Teachers go get paid. They already went to school. They're going to get paid, Ray. So, again, it's not the teachers. There's no way in the world it's the teachers. Sure, it might be some bad teachers in there, but it's bad apples in every barrel. So, you know, it's just like that.
Thank you.
Anyway, listen, let me get out there and hear your response, and thanks for taking the call.
Thank you. I think I have is there another caller waiting? Go ahead, caller. Are you there, caller?
Yes, sir.
Please be quick. I'm running out of time.
You're right, 100%. But the thing is, you take care of your children, you teach them what to do, and then they go to school and act a fool. What's the teacher supposed to do? Just let them act a fool all day? That's crazy. And I didn't say all teachers are bad. I just said the few that don't want to do anything make it bad for the rest.
Thank you. Well, this is why, look, these human behaviors don't pop up out of a vacuum. When you have a culture where the majority of youth, or a high percentage of youth, more than 20%, more than 30% of youth go to school looking to fight, looking to act a fool, they arrive, our children are arriving in the school system with no fear of adults, no respect for adults. You cannot logically, rationally blame teachers for that. If your parent does not make you respect and fear the power, authority, and intelligence of adults, then you can't blame the teachers for that. You must deal with the deficiencies in parenting. Okay? So maybe next week I'll talk a little bit about parenting skills. I mentioned a few today, but we have a crisis in the black home. If we deal with the fact that our families were destroyed by federal, state, and local policy. That's why I started talking about CPD, CPS, all these institutions. That's why I started this season out talking about these external institutions and how they deliberately destroyed our family structures. We're living in the aftermath of those policies, and we're dealing with the youth who were produced by broken homes that were destroyed by federal policy as it relates to drugs, narcotics, and guns that were used to destroy the black family. So we have young people that are raising themselves. We have young people whose mothers are they're not the same. They don't have quality parenting skills. Fathers that are there don't have quality parenting skills. So we don't have time to go into all of that this week. I'll try to pick it up from there next week. But we need to understand that young people, no young person ever produces themselves. They're either produced by our efforts or our neglect. So I'm out of time. This is the Street Peace Coalition. This is Minister Michael signing off for another episode. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, 5 o'clock right here on Chicago Cable, channel 21 on Comcast in Chicago. Thank you.